to Ghost Pirate Entertainment. I'm your host, Kanan Becker, and today we talk about 10 more horror movies that I highly recommend. And with that, let's get to the list.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Alien Romulus is a 2024 sci-fi horror movie, co-written and directed by Fede Alvarez. It's the 9th film in the Alien franchise, and is set between the events of Alien and Aliens. It stars Kaylee Spaney, Isabella Merced, and David Johnson. While scavenging a derelict space station, a group of young space colonizers come face to face with the most terrifying life form in the universe.
There's something in the water.
What do you mean there's something in the water?
I don't know, there's just something in the fucking water.
So this was a real mixed bag for people, at least from what it seems to me. I personally love it. I've heard the complaint that there's not a lot of story to it, not much substance to it. I've heard the problem that a lot of people have is that it was cast with a lot of younger people, all this and that. And my biggest argument with that is, why would you want them to just basically remake the originals all over again? Why not do something fresh and different? And I love the fact that we've heard that they're making a sequel to this movie with these same actors in it. That makes me really happy because I think maybe it's not perfect. I'm not trying to argue that it is, but I do think it's a lot of fun and a great direction to take this, because I'd love to see where the outcome of these characters ends when their journey is over. I'm a big fan of the special effects that we're using in this. A ton of them were practical. There's even some, I'm not going to spoil it for you in case you haven't seen it, but there's some that a lot of people thought were CGI and was actually practically done. But the mood, the atmosphere, the look, the style of it, Fede Alvarez just does such a great job of making a movie so creepy and ominous. So if you haven't seen this one, it's available now on Hulu, and I think you should absolutely go check this one out.
I fear no evil. Thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me.
Borderland is a 2007 Mexican-American horror movie, written and directed by Zev Berman. It's loosely based on the true story of Adolfo Constanzo and stars Ryder Strong, Sean Astin, and Martha Higuereta. On a trip to a Mexican border town, 3 college friends stumble upon a human sacrifice cult.
Hello? Where am I?
The other side of the rainbow.
So if you're not familiar with Adolfo Constanzo, I recommend, especially if you're into true crime and things like that, I recommend going and digging in that rabbit hole, going and checking out some podcasts that talk about it, things like that, because it is so sick and twisted. This movie takes a little bit of that story, but mostly it's just inspired by things like that. But this movie gets dark, gets twisted, very gross, uncomfortable, and brutal. It's always surprised me that it isn't talked about more. It's so dirty and gritty and just makes you feel uncomfortable the entire runtime. And I thought Ryder Strong was great in this, but Sean Astin plays a villain so well in this. He just is such a likable type of figure, and so to see him doing a more darker role, I thought was a lot of fun as well. But if you like them grimy and disturbing and like cult kind of horror movies, this is one you definitely need to see.
What do you mean?
It's embarrassing.
Which part?
Dream Scenario is a 2023 black comedy fantasy thriller, written and directed by Christopher Borgli. It stars Nicolas Cage, Julian Nicholson, and Dylan Galula. An ordinary family man finds his life turned upside down when strangers suddenly start to see him in their dreams. This is such an awkward, uncomfortable, very strange, but very creative movie. From the way it's shot, to the props, to the story itself, everything just doesn't feel quite right, and it continues to spiral out of control and get weirder and more uncomfortable as the movie goes. And I thought Nicolas Cage just knocked this role out of the park. I mean, he just does a great job with just about anything he's given, but this is a good one because he just has to play a real normal kind of guy. It's not your super over-the-top Nicolas Cage performance. It's a much more subdued kind of situation. But as his life gets more and more out of control, that's when you start to see Nicolas Cage coming out and being a little bit more of Nicolas Cage. And it's really interesting because the way it's put together, because a lot of this movie, you're not quite sure when you're in a dream or when it's actually happening. And so it just kind of flows from one to the next. And you'll realize at points that something you might have been watching was a dream and not real. But then as his waking life begins to get more strange as well, you start to question what even is supposed to be reality. And it's very funny at times, but also pretty dark and twisted and definitely disturbing as well. But I think it's a real gem and definitely one to add to your list.
Live or die, the choice is yours.
Saw 10 is a 2023 horror movie. Directed and edited by Kevin Gruder, it stars Tobin Bell, Shawnee Smith, and Sonove Makodi Lund. A sick and desperate John Kramer travels to Mexico for a risky experimental procedure, only to discover the entire operation is a scam to defraud the most vulnerable.
According to these scans, the tumor was never removed.
How much time do I have?
Months, at best.
I've been a Saw fan from the beginning. I've seen almost every single one of them in theaters. It was so awesome for so many years having one come out every Halloween. And so it was just this great feeling last year to know that we got a new Saw movie. I didn't expect it to be any good though. That's the thing. That's what impressed me so much about this, because they could have just kind of made another one and people would have still went and seen it. It would have made money. It would have been fun, whatever. But they actually made this a good movie. It's very interesting because it takes John Kramer, who we all love, but as a villain, we love seeing him be this horrible, villain. But to see him as a vulnerable man and to kind of see it from his perspective and kind of root for him for a change was really weird, but also very fun to do. And holy shit, Tobin Bell, even at the late age that he's at this point, he still has so much energy, so much charisma, and just killed this role. And they're supposedly working on Saw 11, and the hopes are for it to come out later next year or maybe the following year. I just hope that Tobin Bell stays in good enough health to be able to make one more, because just to see him one more time as John Kramer would be fantastic. And I find it really interesting to think about the directions that they could take a Saw 11, because if you've seen this, you know the way it ends. And so it just leads you to think, what could they do next? Like, how are they going to take this story? And if you're not aware, this takes place between the events of Saw 2 and Saw 3. And that's why John Kramer is still alive, which I think is a really interesting solution on how to bring John Kramer back, because everybody wanted John Kramer back. It's like the Saw movies were still fun, but with John Kramer, they're absolute gold. It gets graphic and gruesome in a way that all of us fans of the Saw franchise definitely appreciate it. I think this movie is awesome and one that I highly, highly recommend.
I'm really looking forward to our time here together.
A Wounded Fawn is a 2022 psychological horror movie. Directed by Travis Stevens, it stars Sarah Lind, Josh Rubin, and Malin Barr. A serial killer brings an unsuspecting victim on a weekend getaway to add another body to his ever-growing count, until things take a wild, unexpected turn.
To art and beauty.
And the night ahead.
So just off the jump, this is not a movie for everyone. It is very artsy, it's very creative, it's an art house indie horror movie. So that just doesn't work for everyone. It is a bit of a slow burn, and there is a lot of dialogue. That's the main focus of this movie. But if that's the kind of movies you enjoy, this one is truly special. In a lot of ways, it kind of reminded me of Strange Darling. Now, they have totally different stories, they go in very different directions, but the way the filmmakers saw them, how it's very artful, the way it's shot, the way it's edited, everything from the color palette to the set design, the wardrobe, All of that is meticulously put together to really give a certain feeling to the movie. But I think this movie is just truly gorgeous. It's honestly one of my favorite indie movies from the last couple years, and it's a real shame that it just went over to Shudder and just kind of was forgotten. There was a little bit of buzz, like a tiny bit of buzz when it first dropped on Shudder that lasted a couple weeks, and then it just faded away like a lot of other really great movies that are on Shudder. But this goes in some really interesting directions. There's a lot of surprises in it, things that you just don't see coming. And it does some things that definitely won't work for everyone. Like I said, you gotta be a fan of indie horror. But if you enjoy the artfully done, the creatively shot, the uniquely put together kind of thriller horror movies, this is one you absolutely need to see.
Where's this going?
Mulholland Drive is a 2001 surrealist neo-noir horror thriller. Written and directed by David Lynch, it stars Naomi Watts, Laura Herring, and Justin Theroux. After a car wreck on the winding Mulholland Drive renders a woman amnesiac, she and a perky Hollywood hopeful search for clues and answers across Los Angeles in a twisting venture beyond dreams and reality.
Yeah. The girl is still missing.
What's wrong?
I don't know who I am.
This is another gorgeous movie, but it's so weird and just strange, like only David Lynch could basically do. His films feel straight up like a dream. They're just, you never have the sense of reality in them. Everything, even the most simple things, just never feel quite right. And so a lot of his movies feel more like an experience than entertainment. But this movie will hit you in every sense, from the sound design to the visuals to just the way it makes you feel. This is a real creative film. And I love movies that have that old school neo-noir feel of a mystery, where you're just trying to guess along with the characters what is going on and what happened. And this movie is one of the toughest to solve and figure out. There's so many theories out there of people that think it means one thing or another. But it's David Lynch. That's almost an impossible thing to do, at least to figure out what he, as the filmmaker, was trying to say with it. It's a bizarre, mysterious, fantastical movie, and one that I think is a definite must-see. The Cell is a 2000 sci-fi psychological horror movie. Directed by Tarsem Singh, it stars Jennifer Lopez, Vince Vaughn, and Vincent D'Onofrio. An FBI agent persuades a social worker who is adept with the new experimental technology to enter the mind of a comatose serial killer in order to learn where he has hidden his latest kidnapped victim.
You bring in this monster, and you're asking her to go into that mind.
I think this is a perfect one to pair up with Mulholland Drive. That's why I put them back to back. It isn't exactly the same type of movie. It doesn't look the same, anything like that. But they both have this real fantastical, weird quality to them. This one, you know when you're in a dream, whereas in Mulholland Drive, it never really quite feels like reality. You're never quite sure what's going on. This, you do know you're in a dream, but the way things look, how it happens, there's lots of surprises because you just really can't ever put a finger on the directions it's going to take or what exactly is going to happen. But it's so creative. The special effects, I mean, some of them, yes, there are some dated CGI, but a lot of the things done in this still hold up to this day and look amazing. It's colorful and just gorgeous while also being very creepy, very uncomfortable and disturbing. And Vincent D'Onofrio is just so good at playing a villain. The only movie I've seen him in where I think he's even more disturbing as a villain is the movie Chained. And if you haven't seen that, definitely check that one out. But this movie is just awesome. He is so creepy, so weird, so off-putting, but also charming in a weird way, and you just can't take your eyes off of him. But this movie is trippy. It's so weird and bizarre, almost feels like you're on something, if you know what I mean. But I think it's great. It's a real gem, and one that I wish more people would talk about, because it definitely deserves to be remembered. From Black is a 2023 horror movie. Directed by Thomas Marchese, it stars Anna Camp, John Ells, and Jennifer LaFleur. A recovering drug addict, desperate for closure and saddled with crushing guilt, is presented with a bizarre offer to learn the truth about what happened and to set things right.
It's a ritual.
Like a seance?
No. It's like a ritual.
This is a very small movie, a low budget. It holds it back in some places, but I think for the most part, this movie really does a lot of special things because it handles some really dark subject matter and goes in some disturbing directions with it. But then it also ends up having some really awesome practical effects, things that are definitely memorable in it. Because once this movie goes for it, it gets pitch black dark and really uncomfortable. And I really think the cast do a great job in this, especially Anna Camp. She's really believable and the emotions come through. You just feel the turmoil, the crushing guilt, all the things that she's going through, even just in the way her mannerisms are and the way she looks just with her eyes. It's a thought-provoking, very interesting, well-done movie that makes you think and sticks with you, gets under your skin and sticks with you long after you've seen it. It was one of my top movies from last year and one that is absolutely worth your time.
It's time to listen.
Cold Skin is a 2017 French-Spanish sci-fi horror movie. Directed by Xavier Gens, it stars Ora Garrido, Ray Stevenson, and David Oakes. A young man arrives at a remote island to take post as a weather observer, only to find himself defending the watchtower from deadly creatures.
I would have to live in a solitude like exile for 12 months.
Remember, it's the still and silent sea that drowns a man.
Here's another strange one that definitely will make you scratch your head at times, makes you uncomfortable definitely throughout, subjects that it touches on, different weirdness throughout. But I love how it has this real Lovecraftian vibe and feel to it. And if you have been around watching this channel for a while, you know that cosmic horror and Lovecraftian stuff is my absolute favorite subgenre. But this is a small movie that really goes for it, reaches for the brass ring. Not all of that lands, so to speak. Some of the effects that are used, this and that, don't quite work, but a lot of the practical effects that they do are really cool and unique. But the cast and their performances are what really make this movie worth seeing. Because they're passionate, they're earnest with those performances. You could tell they're really going for it. You could just really feel them believing in these characters, and it makes you sucked in, makes you believe in these characters and this situation. I've been a fan of Ray Stevenson for a long time. Everything from TV shows to movies, he just always gives great performances. This is an interesting, exciting little movie that isn't necessarily going to be a game changer, but I do think you'll definitely be entertained. No One Will Save You is a 2023 sci-fi horror movie. Written, directed, and produced by Brian Duffield and stars Caitlin Dever. An exiled, anxiety-ridden homebody must battle an alien that has found its way into her home. This movie is so much fun. It was one of my top picks from last year, and I'm really surprised how I've seen this movie just kind of fade out of the zeitgeist. Yes, there was a buzz about it, people talking about it for a minute, but not as much as it really deserves, because this movie is really special. For one, there's basically no dialogue in this, and I didn't even realize until at least halfway through. I've heard people tell me they never realized there wasn't dialogue. That's how well done this is, because we're talking about a movie that basically has one actor in it for 99% of it, that has almost no dialogue except for basically one sentence, and yet is never boring, never slow, constantly things are happening, you're interested, you're either feeling this anxiety and you're under tension, or there's exciting, crazy action things happening. No matter what, it never ever feels slow. And for such a tiny little movie, the special effects, the practical work, and then even the CGI really work in this. It just has such a refreshing, stylish feel to it. And I know the ending is what kind of threw off a lot of people. A lot of people just don't quite get what is happening there. And I can't explain that without spoiling it. I do have my own theories on what I think it's trying to say at the end of this and what exactly happens. So if you want to talk about it down in the comments, write spoiler first and we can get into a discussion in the comments. But I loved it. I love the ending, even though it's quirky and weird and makes you question things. I love it. I love everything about this movie. And I just can't wait to see Brian Duffeld's next project because he just is such an exciting filmmaker that I think has a really bright future. The only downer about this movie is that it didn't go to theaters. I would have loved to have seen this on the big screen. Maybe one day a cult following will rise for this movie and we'll see it on screen somehow. Either that or one day I'll get rich and buy this big old huge TV and invite a bunch of you guys over and we'll watch it on a big screen in my backyard. Like that'll happen. But either way, I think this movie's a blast and absolutely one that's a perfect pick for this Saturday night. So do yourself a favor this weekend, pick one of the movies off of this list, grab your popcorn and your candy and enjoy. And I want to give a huge, massive, enormous thank you to the Ghost Pirate crew, to you guys over on Patreon, and to the channel members over here. You guys mean so much to me. And if you would like to help support this channel over on Patreon, there's a link down in the description. Or you can become a channel member and help support the channel that way by clicking on the join button down there. But like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button. And remember, guys, horror can be fun. And if you enjoyed this, click right here to watch me talk about 10 more horror movies that I think you'll enjoy. And I'll see you guys next time.